As a missionary, practicing proper table manners may have more impact on your work than you realize. A 19th century newspaper editor in Boston once wrote, "One knows the very nature of both man and woman by their actions at the table. One suddenly sees their innermost characters, their attitudes, their breeding, but above all, one knows whether one cares to spend another evening at the table with them."
The very nature of a man or woman can be told how they act at the table. And this is from a series called Manners for Missionaries, which was produced by the church in order to teach missionaries how to have better manners, basically. And obviously it's from a while ago, but I 100%, when I was a Mormon missionary, watched portions of these videos to learn how to do my hair better, how to, be more respectful, how to build credibility so that people would trust you. Let me know if you want a full reaction to those videos because they're hilarious. I have no idea if they're still being used today, but I definitely watched them when I was first on my mission so that I could learn the correct way to act as a missionary. I will link those videos below and I'll also be spreading small clips throughout this video. Today's video is dedicated to the outrageously strict rules that Mormon missionaries are required to follow. And it's actually kind of crazy, and they are legitimately outrageous. I can't believe I was even able to make it through a year and a half following these rules. And I'll say that some sources say that up to 50% of the Mormon missionaries who currently go out to serve today end up returning home before they finish their mission, which is a huge amount. And for me, anecdotally, when I served a mission, almost none of the missionaries I knew went home that were with me on my mission. I can think of one who went home for a major medical surgery and didn't return. But when I worked at the MTC, which is the Missionary Training Center where all missionaries go, or used to go, some people do it online now. When I worked there, 2 years after I served my mission, each new group of missionaries, we'd usually have 1 to 2 to 3 missionaries end up going home, even just in the MTC. So that'd be maybe 2 missionaries out of a group of 6, 8, or 10 was usually the number. So that those are kids who are arriving to the MTC and looking around and realizing, I don't think I can do this, and then requesting to go home. And then that's just the group that's there for the first week. So I can only imagine how many missionaries throughout the 2 years for men, year and a half for women are realizing they can't put up with this. It's just too much. Buckle in, because not only are these rules incredibly strict, there is a lot of them. And this is the White Handbook, Missionary Handbook. Some people refer to this as the White Bible because it's what missionaries cling to so closely. I was required to read 3 pages of this per day, every single day of my mission. So by the time I finished my mission, I had probably read this between 30, 40, 50 times, because you're reading it every single day, so much that I basically had portions of this book memorized by the time I went home from my mission. They've updated this book, and I'll put the link of the updated version below. So not all of the rules are exactly the same as when I served my mission. However, they're basically the same. They've made a few things easier on missionaries, which I'll explain as we go. It's essentially the same book of rules, though, and some of the most difficult and most strict aspects of being a missionary are very much still going on. This book is 82 pages long and covers everything from Sundays and holidays, preparation day, entertainment, music, the opposite sex, housing, health, safety, security, communicating with family, temple attendance. There's a whole table of contents at the beginning. So we're going to go through all of these rules today. We're going to discuss, before we jump into the crazy long list of all the rules that Mormon missionaries have to follow, I would love to introduce today's sponsor. As you may know, the content I make is pretty critical towards the Mormon Church. And so when I started posting this stuff, I decided to Google myself and just see what was available online about me. It was kind of freaky to realize how easy it was to find my personal information online. Unfortunately, it's pretty easy to get access to this type of information for most people, and that's because data brokers sell your information information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, address, relatives, health information, you name it, it's probably out there floating on the web somewhere. That's why I've been using Aura, which is the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. I don't know if you saw this, but AT&T recently revealed that 73 million customer records of both old members and existing members were released onto the dark web. They recommended that those affected should use strong passwords, monitor account activity, and consider credit freezes as a way to protect themselves. Well, Aura does all this for me, and the best news is that I don't have to download several different apps in order to keep my data secure. I value my privacy and I value yours, which is why you can go to aura.com/Alyssa Grenfell to start your 2-week free trial. You'll also find that link down low in the description, and I hope you check them out. One of the most outrageous rules is that as a Mormon missionary, you can never be alone. And I say that full stop. Never be alone. It's called sight and sound, and you always have to be within sight and sound of your missionary companion. That means you must be in the same room basically at all times. So if you're, and the only exception is for showering or using the bathroom. So, you know, those two things. And if you shower for too long, you may have someone knocking at the door. To illustrate this point, so essentially, even if someone is on the other side of the door, then you have to go through the door with them. So my companion, you know, maybe somebody's getting ready, somebody needs to get breakfast in the morning. If your companion is still eating breakfast, you have to stay in the kitchen with them. You can't go downstairs and finish getting ready. If your companion, you know, maybe you're in a church building, you're working on studying, and your companion says, I need to use the restroom, you both get up, walk down the hall together, and one person stands outside the door so as to be close as possible while the other person used the bathroom. Sight is the one that people rely on the most, but sound is also very important. So I really like running, but I essentially could never run on my mission because for example, if you were to go to a track, you could still see your companion running around the track, but if you can't hear them, then you're still being disobedient. So, and the rule that you're taught is that if you have to yell, then the person is too far away from you, or even raise your voice, say that they're on the other side of a basketball gym. If you have to raise your voice to get their attention, you are too far away from them. I can't really stress how much it is that you are basically shoulder to shoulder with another human being your entire mission. You're definitely not allowed to choose who your missionary companion is. It's assigned to you. So sometimes you get kind of lucky and you get assigned to someone who you get along with, someone that becomes a friend, and it's not so bad because you're just with your friend all the time. But other times you get assigned to someone who you kind of hate, but you already feel guilty about hating them because you're on a mission, you're supposed to love everybody. But when you're assigned to someone that you dislike, you have to be with them 24/7. Let me read you the rule from the handbook. Never be alone. Period. No exceptions. Never be alone. So that's a huge rule. Never be alone. I just want you to think for a second, just contemplate the psychological impact of that single sentence. Never be alone. It is extremely important that you stay with your companion at all times. Staying together means staying within sight and hearing of each other. Never make exceptions to the standard for activities that seem innocent but take you away from each other, including being in different rooms in the same building or in a home. So like I said, if your companion needs to go get breakfast and that's upstairs, you have to trudge behind them to go get breakfast with them, or you have to move through the house. You know, think about any time that you might think, oh, I forgot my scriptures in the other room. You know, your companion has to stand up and waddle behind you to go get the scriptures and then walk back in the other room and sit down. It's just crazy to me that you can't even like relax in your own home. Even within the home, if you're the only two people there, you're still required to stay glued together. The other portion of this is that you are required to sleep. You're also required to sleep in the same room. So even sleeping, never be alone. Usually a missionary apartment will have 2 twin beds, 2 desks for your gospel studies, and you're never allowed to sleep in the same bed. It says that very expressly, but you should always sleep in the same room. So it says if you live in an apartment with more than 1 room, always sleep in the same room as your companion, but not in the same bed. Arise and retire at the same time as your companion. Do not stay up late or get up early to be alone. It's almost like they can tell that people are going to be so thirsty to be alone that they'll do whatever it takes to just get a small moment of peace. And I feel like that's how I used to feel sometimes in the bathroom, taking a shower. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I would get woken up by whatever. Just sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night, and I remember I would just lay in my bed and just feel so peaceful, because it would just be one of the few moments that I would feel like I was kind of alone while my companion was sleeping, and I somehow woke up at 2 a.m. and I would just lay there and enjoy the stillness, because being alone is a form of recharging, especially for someone who's more introverted. It's very difficult to be kind of watched the entire time. The reason you can never be alone is because they want you to hold each other to this standard of righteousness, this standard of obedience. So really, they even say it very much out loud and in the open. The reason that you can never be alone is because we want to watch you like a hawk. We want one other person monitoring your behavior to make sure that you're following all these rules. Just a reminder to like this video, subscribe to my channel if you want to learn more about Mormon missionaries. I have another video that I suggest checking out. This is a video that does cover some of these rules, but also covers my story as a Mormon missionary and why I regret my Mormon mission. If you served a Mormon mission, please drop a comment about which rule was the hardest for you to follow, if you were disobedient. On my mission, we use the slang diso as when we were talking about missionaries who slept in, they were disobedient. So if you served a mission and you have a crazy experience, a funny experience, a depressing experience, drop it in the comments below so that we can see the real world lived experience and outcome of people who have to go through serving a mission. Be aware that you have a responsibility to protect your companion from physical and spiritual danger. If you do not fulfill this responsibility and your companion engages in serious misconduct, you may be subject to church disciplinary action. So you're really being big brother for each other. You all are, with your companion, you're reading 3 pages of this per day. You both very much know the rules. And so if somebody is breaking one of these tiny little rules, the companion will notice, because you're never alone, and it becomes this whole thing. The surveillance state on a Mormon mission is very strong. Next, let's walk through the daily schedule. So this is another, to me, very demanding aspect of serving a mission, is the daily schedule. So, and as I describe it, obviously keep in mind, you're never alone. So you're never going to be able to shave a single minute off here or there unless you and your companion are in cahoots together to just say, okay, I guess we're both going to be disobedient. 6:30 a.m. Arise, pray, and exercise. 30 minutes. Don't exercise for more than 30 minutes. Me and my companion would set a timer to make sure that we would only be exercising for 30 minutes and prepare for the day. So every morning for 2 years or year and a half, you have to wake up at 6:30 in the morning. Breakfast is at 7:30. Personal study begins at 8. So you get 30 minutes for breakfast, 30 minutes for exercise, and basically 30 minutes left over for breakfast, anything else you might need to do. So 30 minutes to get ready, 30 minutes to exercise, 30 minutes for breakfast. 8 o'clock is basically the start of the workday, because that's when your personal study begins. That's when your butt is in the chair and you're beginning to study for the day. You can only study approved missionary library, Book of Mormon, other scriptures. It doesn't even say what the other scriptures are. The Book of Mormon, though, is placed first on the list. Missionary library and Preach My Gospel. Preach My Gospel is the missionary handbook, which goes over what lessons you're supposed to teach, Joseph Smith, Plan of Salvation, many, many different things. So you're supposed to go through Preach My Gospel to perfect how to ask questions, how to explain doctrine, that kind of a thing. Emphasize the doctrines of the missionary lessons. At 9 o'clock, you start companion study. So personal study is alone for an hour. Then you do a second. So every missionary is studying for at least 2 hours a day. 9 o'clock is companion study. At 9, companion study, share what you have learned during personal study, prepare to teach, practice teaching. So as a missionary, you do a lot of role playing. So if you were the investigator, which is what missionaries call, I think now they call it friends, whatever, that they always call it something. So if we were two companions, you would pretend to be the investigator that we were preparing to teach. I would be the missionary, and we would have a whole role playing session. So we might role play, for example, inviting someone to be baptized. So if your name was Samantha, the investigator's name was Samantha, I might say, okay, I'm going to practice inviting Samantha to be baptized. I would practice great eye contact, practice saying with my best testimony voice, Samantha, will you follow the example of Jesus Christ by being baptized by someone holding the proper authority of God? We will be holding a baptismal service on 3 weeks from now. Will you prepare yourself to be baptized on that date? And you're supposed to invite people to be baptized the first time you meet with them, the first time you teach them a lesson. And then you're supposed to keep inviting them to be baptized basically every time you meet them until they say yes. At 10 o'clock, you're required to begin proselyting. So that would be knocking on doors, walking around, trying to meet people in a park or something. Really just proselyting refers to doing whatever you may be doing. Sometimes you have an appointment with someone, so you drive to their house and say, go meet with them and teach them their lessons. It says you may take an hour for lunch and additional study, and an hour for dinner at times during the day which fit best with your proselyting time. Normally, dinner should be finished no later than 6 p.m. And then at 9 p.m. is when you return home. So basically, you are out and about from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. So I would have experiences, if you don't have any responsibilities, or lessons set up for 8 o'clock, 8:30, then that means that you're supposed to proselyte that whole time. I can't emphasize that enough. So proselyting means you're supposed to be talking to people about the Mormon Church until 9 o'clock. So we would have situations where it would be 8:30. We're done with maybe the lesson we just got out of, but you can't get back home till 9 o'clock. So if, maybe your house is 10 minutes away and it's 8:30, you have to go knock on people's doors. That's at least if you're following the rules, you have to go knock on people's door from that 8:30 to 8:50 time slot. And that, knocking on people's doors at 8:45 does not make them particularly happy, I noticed. And so it's a lot of pressure to stay out till 9. It's also dangerous. Certain times of the year, the sun goes down at 6, 7, sometimes 5:30. I don't know. Basically, if the sun goes down pretty early, that means you're knocking on doors in the dark till 9 o'clock. And that's dangerous. It's intimidating. It gave me a lot of anxiety. Anytime you knock on people's doors at night, they're generally pretty pissed off. And they are typically people already don't want to talk to religious people, Mormon missionaries, Jehovah's Witnesses, whatever. And so when you go knock on someone's door at 8:45, that sucks. So that's part of the rules is you can't return home. You should be arriving home at 9 o'clock. And then once you arrive home, you should plan for the next day's activities. So that's basically you're still working till 9:30 because you're supposed to update the area book. You're supposed to finalize your plans for tomorrow. And then from basically 9:30 to 10:30 is when you prepare for bed. Write in your journal, prepare for bed, pray. 10:30 is bedtime. So if you're not keeping track, that's basically you're required to be working from 8 a.m. with your study and then proselyting till 9:30 is when you're officially finished. So that's working 10.5 hours a day, and you do that 6 days a week. So you have P day, preparation day. That's your only day off. So you're even doing this on Sunday, which I always thought was a little ironic because they say that Sunday is a day of rest, but for a Mormon missionary, I guess that doesn't apply to you because you're still supposed to be doing this daily schedule on a Sunday, though obviously you do go to church. So if you serve a Mormon mission as a man, then that's 624 days. That is 6,552 hours worked over the course of your mission. Just doing some math here, if you are a male missionary, so you're working those hours and making minimum wage, that means that in the 2 years you would have been working, you should have been paid $47,502. So if a Mormon missionary made at least minimum wage, they would be paid $47,000. Keeping in mind, we'll go over this in a bit, that you are required to pay to serve a mission. You can't even go for free. The church has at least $100 billion, so they don't pay you. They don't even pay you minimum wage. You are required to pay to serve a mission. If I Googled, how much does a youth pastor usually make, the average said $20 an hour. So if you were being paid as much as a youth pastor, as a Mormon missionary, you would make about $131,000 in the course of your mission. So, that's a lot of money for a young 18-year-old to be able to make. If you were being paid for your time, if you were being paid for your clocked in hours of required study, required knocking on doors, required meeting with people, I didn't even factor meals into getting paid there. So $131,000 if you were getting paid as much as your average youth pastor. That's a lot of money, but so Mormon missionaries pay $500 a month instead of getting paid. You're told that $500 helps subsidize the costs of Mormon missionaries, which I will say is kind of crazy. On my Mormon mission, I always lived with members, so they didn't have some big rent bill to cover for me or my companions. My entire mission, everybody lived with members. They're not paying for your clothing. You have to pay for your own clothing and keep in mind what you wear as a missionary is pretty specific. Ties, suits, white shirts, longer skirts, blouses, garments. So, you have to pay to buy all of that stuff to basically be able to wear religious clothing, go to church type clothing for 6 days a week. Maybe that's 10 skirts, that's 10 blouses or whatever. And so for men, you're paying $12,000 over those 2 years. So you're not getting your $131,000 paid. You are paying $12,000 to serve a mission and to work 10 to 11 hours a day serving, knocking on doors. And then for women, that's $9,000 for the year and a half. So, that's a lot of money. And that is an amount that I think is a huge burden for a lot of people. My parents help pay for some of my mission, but for a lot of people, they serve a mission instead of even, using that money to go to college. I remember I had a guy that I went to BYU with who he ended up dropping out of BYU because he wasn't going to be able to pay tuition and pay to serve a mission. His parents were very poor. So if he wanted to serve a mission, he had to basically drop out of BYU in order to save the money so that he could serve a mission at all. And I know you might say, why don't more people, they say that the church pays the way for people who don't have the money. I've never met anyone like that in all my years in the church. Asking the church for money is very looked down upon. It's very much shamed as, you're taking out of the plate instead of putting money into the little tithing plate. And it's a very shameful thing to need to take money from the church. So a lot of people would rather get a second job, drop out of BYU, do anything else before ask the church for money, because it's basically viewed as shameful, as you're being a leech on the church and the church's finances. And so very few people, even if they probably could really benefit from financial help, they do not ask the church to help them financially. Another financial aspect of a mission is you get something called an MSF card, Missionary Supply Fund. And this is basically kind of like a gift card that you're given by the church. It's a prepaid card that you get refilled once a month. And this is what you're supposed to use for whatever your expenses are throughout the month. For me, so this is basically like how you're going to pay for food. Because, you might have lunch with a member, you might have dinner with a member, but you're going to be paying for breakfast. You're going to be paying for, shampoo, conditioner, makeup if you're a woman. Because you're going to be paying for these expenses, they give you this MSF card. So for me to pay for my entire month's worth of expenses, guess the number in your brain. What would you think you would need for just as a single person, to get through a month of expenses, maybe considering that dinner will always be taken care of. We always had mission members invite us over for dinner. So for everything else other than dinner, how much do you think you would need in order to subsist? Your rent is covered and your dinner's covered, I guess. So I would receive $120 a month, which a lot of times was just definitely not enough. I would be eating the most cheap versions of breakfast. Usually oatmeal was my go-to breakfast. All the women in the mission usually were a little grumbly about the fact that men and women receive the same amount, because typically, women have period products. Women are asked to wear makeup. Men don't have to pay for makeup. So women do have some additional expenses that weren't represented in the MSF fund. To read the rules for these funds that you receive, it says the funds you receive from the mission are sacred. They represent the sacrifices made by you, your family, and others. Budget your money, be thrifty and wise in how you spend it. Use funds for groceries, personal grooming items, laundry, cleaning supplies, haircuts, postage for letters to family, fast offerings. So you're still supposed to pay fast offerings, which is nuts. So basically that's kind of like another version of tithing. It's not a preset percentage though. So you're just still, of your MSF fund that's supposed to be used for your food, you're still supposed to give some of that MSF to the church, back to the church, and transportation. Limit how often you eat at restaurants, including fast food restaurants. Any funds remaining after these expenses should be returned to the mission. Do not save money received from the mission from month to month to purchase personal items. So if you want clothes, you should use your own money, cameras, souvenirs, your own money. And it's very interesting, this whole do not save money received from the mission to month, because there really were, I even had this in my mission, I'm sure it's pretty common, which is why they put it in there. There are, the church, as we're often reminded, is a worldwide church, and there are missionaries, there are members in some of the most poor countries in the world. There are missionaries who come from very poor families, but they still receive all the same messaging about the importance of serving a mission. They still receive all of the pressure to serve a mission. And so, my family was fairly middle class. I wouldn't say serving a mission was just so financially easy for us. For me, $9,000 is a lot of money for a family on a single income with 4 kids. My family figured it out though. There would be instances of missionaries from very poor countries who came from incredibly poor families. And what these missionaries would do is that they would have their little MSF card. They would get the money out and eat just nothing. They would eat so little. They would not buy shampoo. They would not buy conditioner. They would not buy body wash. They wouldn't do laundry because laundry is an expense. Whatever it is, they would avoid spending money at all costs, because if you're from a very poor country and your parents are being required to pay that $500 a month, you can theoretically still save that 120 or however much it is now. The amount changes depending on missions. If you're in a richer area or like a more expensive cost of living area, you would get a little more. But some missionaries who came from poor families would basically bank their MSF fund so that when they went home, they would be able to give this extra money back to their families, because they were so stressed about this expense and their families were so stressed. So there were instances of missionaries doing whatever it takes to save money, losing weight, just, not spending money on any necessities so that they could save that money and send it back home, which how how sad is that? Like I said, I'm going to remind you again that this church has at least $100 billion in a fund floating around, invested into the stock market. And meanwhile, there are members who are serving missions, working 10 plus hour days to knock on doors to try to get more converts who are going to pay more tithing. And they are starving themselves so that they can save a little bit of money to send back to their families. That is very bleak. And I mean, obviously it's technically against the rules, but this was still happening in my mission, and it's in the rule book. So, I think money is money. And when you come from a poor family, from a poor country, you're going to save that money over using it for yourself. It seems to be what's happening in some cases. As I said, you get one day off. That's called P-Day. It's nicknamed P-Day, stands for Preparation Day. And, tell me, does that sound like a day off? Preparation Day. So it's still not really a day off where you're just carefree. There's still a ton of rules surrounding your day off. So it's not really a day off. For example, you still have to wear your name tag the whole time. You're still, when you're grocery shopping, you're still supposed to be wearing a name tag, which I found a little humiliating because, where do you just want to be anonymous in the grocery store? Just let me get my food, please. But we were still, required to wear a name tag, and it still says you're supposed to look for opportunities to proselytize. So it's, we'd be in the grocery store and we'd be standing next to some lady, and it's part of the rules to proselyte during your grocery shopping. So sometimes we would talk to people in the grocery store and, great cereal choice. Do you love Jesus? But we never had any success, but we would definitely still try because that was part of the expectation. In addition, your preparation day ends at 6, and from 6 to 9 o'clock, you're still required and expected to go out and knock on doors and teach people, or try to find people to teach. So it's really not even technically a whole day off because you still have a 3-hour block of working. I should have figured that into the hourly wage. I did not. So P-Day ends at 6, and then for 3 hours, you're still expected to go out and teach. It says in the book, use preparation day to take care of personal needs, such as writing to your family, washing clothes, getting a haircut, cleaning your apartment, shopping, and washing the car if you have been assigned one to use. Also use this day to prepare so that you can give full attention to proselytizing during the rest of the week. So in that little intro paragraph, they definitely didn't say anything about take a nap, relax because you've been working hard. No, you're going to be cleaning the car. There is a section in here about doing recreational activities on your mission. I never, I served in Denver, Colorado. I never once stepped foot in the downtown area. I never went to a zoo. I never went to a museum. Typically, even driving to these places may take 45 minutes or something. I was in the suburbs most of the time. So if you realize, your time is so precious, you still are studying. So you basically have your P-Day, your day off from 10 o'clock after studies, because you're still supposed to study, to 6 o'clock. And then in that time, you're supposed to do your lunch and dinner as well. So it's a very small amount of time. So I never did anything fun. I also never went on a hike, never had the opportunity to go on a hike. So anyways, it says cultural and recreational activities should help you work more productively during the rest of the week. You may, for example, visit such places as historical sites, cultural centers, museums, art galleries, zoos, and special exhibits. Use mission vehicles only for official purposes or as authorized by your mission president. That was another thing. So, you're supposed to stay in the area where you're serving. So that's a fairly small geographic region. To leave your area, you're supposed to get permission either from your zone leader or from the mission president, depending on how far you're going from your house. And so that was another reason, is that asking your mission president for special permission to go somewhere, like to the zoo, is considered needy. At least it was on my mission. So we never went outside of our area really on P-Days, because calling your mission president and saying, can I go to a museum, was kind of seen as you're not really focused enough on the work. You're not not using P-Day as efficiently as you could be. And so it lists all these things, and it makes me scratch my head because I wonder, do they know what missionaries are doing? Maybe my mission is just weird, but I definitely never did any of these things. It also says avoid gatherings in large groups of missionaries when you visit public places, I guess to avoid standing out. Safety. Recreational activities should be safe. Never go swimming or take part in water sports. So no swimming. Avoid activities that may restrict your physical ability the rest of the week or cause injury. These activities include, but are not limited to, contact sports, winter sports, motorcycling, horseback riding, mountain or rock climbing, riding in private boats or airplanes, handling firearms, fireworks, or explosives of any kind. So don't do anything too crazy, because they don't want you to get hurt and have to potentially pay for your medical care. They also want you to stay safe because a missionary who breaks his leg can't very well go knock on doors. So I think they even say that, don't do anything that's going to keep you from being able to do the rest of your missionary service. They're really restricting you so that they can keep you as their little worker bee. If you play basketball, volleyball, or another sport, do not allow the situation to become intense or competitive. For example, do not keep score. So we're not allowed to keep score. That's one of the rules, right? A rule for a Mormon missionary is do not keep score while you're playing basketball because it makes it too competitive. The purpose of recreational activity is exercise that will help you meet the physical demands of your work. Competitive games can lead to injury or fatigue. If you play basketball, play only half court. So man, that really takes the fun out of basketball. Don't keep score, play half court. Oh my goodness. It's just too strict. So I found this funny little video, but let's see, they're going to observe a missionary on P-Day and they're going to critique if that missionary was being obedient or not.
Spencer? Okay, clearly the elder in the red is not great. But overall, it's, good. They're getting exercise. It's not competitive. In a way, they're kind of cooperating. So, helping each other up the rock like that.
Jerem, again from the Missionary Handbook. Missionaries need to avoid activities that could cause injury or extreme fatigue. We're talking things like contact sports, winter sports, motorcycling, horseback riding, mountain or rock climbing, riding in private boats or airplanes, handling firearms, or using fireworks or explosives of any kind.
How long did it take you to memorize that? Also, didn't see any explosives on that hike.
What starts off as a simple hike in the mountains can easily turn into dangerous climbing, and even if no one gets injured, that one elder is going to be sore for days. Talk about restricting physical ability during the rest of the week.
Excellent analysis, Vivian.
A simple hike turned disobedient because they were rock climbing. I love that, this is what the church is messaging to missionaries to me. This is as absurd as the Manners for Missionary video, even though it has better graphics, obviously. The idea that they need this video to help discern if a hike is a hike or if a hike is rock climbing and if it's safe enough, that's absurd, right? Is this really what Jesus cares about? I don't know the man personally. I think it also reveals just how much people spend time discussing the rules, discussing these boundaries, trying to figure out what's the exact way to be obedient. I also think it's hilarious that one of those elders is in jeans for the hike. I don't know. But this safety zone video is actually fairly interesting to me because I did this so much on my mission, talking about if these little mundane, tiny little things that we were doing are obedient or not obedient, because ultimately obedience is how you show God you love him. And obedience is how you show that you are consecrated to the work and how you're really, on my mission, we had this quote about how obedience brings blessings, and exact obedience brings miracles. So if you're being exactly obedient, there's obedience, but then there's exact obedience, and they're separated out as two different things. Exact obedience is to be perfectly obedient to all the rules in this very long 80 whatever pages book. That's a high bar to set. And I think for anyone who's ever struggled with scrupulosity, anyone who's ever struggled with, feeling very bad about themselves, guilt of over breaking rules, it's a recipe for disaster, because it's basically saying, on my mission, we also said, if you wake up at 6:30, you're exactly obedient. You're showing God that if there's someone out there in your mission who is ready for the gospel to be taught to them, that he can trust putting that person in your way, in your path, so that you meet them and that you teach them. However, waking up at 6:31 is not exactly obedient. So God will withhold introducing that potential investigator, that potential person. He won't put them in your path because he knows you're not righteous enough and in tune with the Spirit enough in order to teach them well and to be a powerful enough missionary. The safety video is really a commentary on the broader mindset of a mission, which is that there's obedience, which is often phrased as almost sinning, because if you could be exactly obedient and you're not, you're falling short of the mark. My husband just delivered me some coffee. Now, a common question I get, which is a very understandable question, is who's making you follow these rules? I kind of already talked about the mission companion, but obviously they're not, they don't have a gun to your head, as they say. So there's a lot of aspects as to, I also get this comment a lot when I complain about my temple wedding, which, if you haven't watched that video, I suggest, but it basically, as a member of the church, you kind of do gymnastics in order to fit yourself into the box that they want you to fit in. And for those on the outside, they often wonder, why not just walk away? Why not just say, I don't actually want to do this? If you think about a situation where someone comes to you holding a piece of excrement and says, if you eat this, you'll get $100 million and you'll never be sad ever again. And everyone who you've ever loved will think of you as the, best person ever. And they just start listing off, anything you've ever dreamed of, you will get if you eat this. However, if you don't eat this, we will deduct all the money from your bank account. Everyone you've ever met will hate you, and you'll never, ever, ever be happy again. I don't know if that's really a choice. And at that point, it's not even necessarily really about the excrement itself as much as these two things that are going to happen as a result of eating it or not. So of course, that person is not saying you have to eat this. This person is saying, if you do this highly disgusting and undesirable thing, all your dreams will come true. And if you don't do it, everything you've ever been afraid of will happen if you don't do it. So, it's at that point, I don't know if it is really a choice for a logical human being. And when you're operating in the Mormon mindset, I think that's why most people go along with the program, because it's not about whether the choice makes them happy or not. That's really not the question at all. It doesn't actually matter. Your happiness doesn't matter if the result of the action is going to be the fulfillment of your dreams. So I got married in the temple. I didn't get to wear the dress that was my dream dress. 2 of my sisters were not allowed to come to my wedding. My grandma had to sit in the parking lot, even though she drove all the way from Albuquerque. Driving is pretty hard for elderly people. She didn't get to come in to see my wedding because she was not an active member of the Mormon church. So I didn't do all of that because I hated my family. I didn't do all of that because the dress never mattered to me. I was willing to put up with all of that because I believed that getting married in the temple was the only way to ensure that my marriage would last into the afterlife, and that any children that me and my spouse would have would be connected to me in the afterlife too. So it's not like I was just so happy hunky-dory to go and get married in the temple, because ultimately I really disliked a lot of aspects of my wedding. But it's not really about eating the poop. It's about the promises that you think you're going to get as a result of eating it. And that's why, I think that's also why a lot of missionaries follow all of these rules, because it's not like for a lot of people playing half-court basketball just fills them with joy, and wow, this is exactly the type of basketball I was hoping I would be able to play right now. They do it because the promise is that you'll get miracles on your mission if you're exactly obedient. Knocking on someone's door at 8:50 at night is how you show Jesus Christ that his atonement, that his dying on the cross, that his atonement in the Garden of Gethsemane, that all of that is deeply important to you. And so I think that's something that people often miss from the equation, is not that you're following these rules because you just love it so much. You're following it because the rule represents many other things to you. Another common thing that people say on missions is that the purpose of a Mormon mission is not truly in the end to find converts, because I knocked on a lot of doors. I never had someone join the church from knocking on doors, but when you have no other way to reach people, that's what you end up doing. The reason that you serve a mission is to become personally converted to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the gospel. So you're in the end, they also will say, if you have one convert from your mission, make sure it's you. So, some people really do serve their entire 2-year mission and they never get a single convert, and they still can view it personally as a success if they can say, well, I became more converted, I became closer to God, I became more sure than ever before of Joseph Smith, the Book of Mormon, the atonement, whatever principle you want to throw in there. And so I think another thing to note with following these rules is that it's a way to, I think, personally convert yourself to the church, to the gospel, because it feels like by following these rules, you're becoming more of a convert yourself. Following all these tiny little nitty-gritty rules is a way to say, well, if I didn't get a convert on my mission, at least I converted myself. At least I've shown and proved to God that I love him. Quick reminder before we continue to like this video, drop a comment below if you have a question about anything I've said. I try to go through and answer as many questions as I can get to. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. I release a new video every week talking about the church, whether it's, my mission. I've talked about my temple wedding, the endowment. Always have a new video coming out every week, so subscribe if you want to see more. If you're someone who's in the middle of leaving the church and you're looking for a resource, I suggest checking out my book, How to Leave the Mormon Church, which is an ex-Mormon's guide to rebuilding after religion. And I cover a lot of different aspects of what it was like for me to leave the church, how to tell your family and friends, how to go about ordering your first cocktail. I really try to add everything I wish I had information about when I left the church. You can find it in the link below. Let's talk about the rules for media. And there are a lot of rules surrounding media because I guess that's how the devil gets you. So really, besides anything produced by the church, you're not allowed to take part in any media that is not church produced. So you can't read novels, you can't listen to your favorite bands, you can't watch movies or, watch your latest Netflix series. None of that. And I cannot stress that. That's another one that is very important to missionaries, is completely shutting yourself off from any media that is not produced by the church. From the book, watch only videos or DVDs that have been authorized by the church or your mission president. Music, listen only to the music that is consistent with the sacred spirit of your calling. Music should invite the spirit, help you focus on your work, and direct your thoughts and feelings toward the Savior. Do not listen to music that pulls your thoughts away from your work, merely entertains, has romantic lyrics or overtones, or dulls your spiritual sensitivity by its tempo, beat, loudness, lyrics, or intensity. So on my mission, we were allowed to listen to music, really it's just any religious religious music or spiritual music, but on my mission, the church produces something called EFY music. We were kind of discouraged from even listening to EFY music because it was too like poppy, I guess. My favorite band that we would listen to was called The Lower Lights, and The Lower Lights is like a folk band that redoes gospel songs. I'm not even sure if they're Mormon. I think they are, but that's an example of a band that is not specifically from the church, but all of their lyrics, all of the music they do is very religious. The most righteous people on my mission would say that they wouldn't even listen to any of that, and they would only listen to hymns. That's what one of the APs in my mission said, that he felt like just because he wanted to be exactly obedient, he would only listen to music produced by the Mormon Tabernacle Choir that was hymns. So, there's always a way to be more extreme with these things, and that was a way that he was more extreme. As for reading, it says, read only books, magazines, and other materials that are authorized by the church. You're not authorized to have electronic or video equipment. You're not authorized to have a personal computer. As far as having a camera, your mission president will advise you on the appropriate use of cameras. Do not use cameras while you are proselytizing. Be careful never to look like a tourist. Do not spend a lot of money on camera equipment and supplies. So there's even rules for cameras. It also says that pornography is not allowed, which is kind of funny. You'd think that was a given, but they obviously felt the need to put that in there. The rules around internet access have changed a little bit. Now missionaries, and you might have even seen them on your Facebook or whatever, the missionaries are allowed to have special Facebook accounts that they use for proselytizing. This would be a separate account from their home account or their personal private account. And so missionaries can use the internet more broadly than they could when I was serving, but it's definitely still just for approved purposes. For example, I would have people, sometimes tell me disconcerting things about the church, but the funny thing is you're not allowed to Google anything. So I think, sometimes people in comments on videos will say, well, what if I explain this to them? Or can I tell them this? Or can I say this to them? And you can, if you want, do whatever you want, but they're not allowed to go and research anything. So if I had someone tell me something disconcerting, I'd usually just brush it off because I'm not going to be able to go Google something. I don't have a personal computer. I'm not allowed to just go look something up on my phone in Safari. So you can use the internet a little bit more than you used to be able to, but it's still just for missionary approved things only. So your missionary Facebook, accessing your online area book, a lot of things have been digitized, but that doesn't mean that they just can surf the internet and look up whatever they want. There are also rules about language. Obviously, you are not allowed to use swear words at all as a Mormon missionary, but you're also not allowed to call people by their first names. So I was Sister Grenfell on my mission, and you're not allowed to know people's first names, even other missionaries, or if somebody asks you, what's your real name? What's your first name? You're not really supposed to tell them. So, even when I would get assigned to people to serve with them, kind of a funny thing that you would do maybe a few weeks into knowing each other, you might ask someone, what's your first name? So, even though you're with someone 24/7, you're still required to call them sister whatever, or elder whatever. So even that is a rule. You can't use nicknames. You can't use only their last name to refer to them. So someone couldn't call me, hey, Grenfell, they're supposed to say elder or sister with the last name. It also says, avoid slang and inappropriately casual language, even in your apartment with your companion or in letters to your family. Show respect for others by using appropriate language, including the correct forms of the word you in cultures where that is important. Missionaries are still required to follow the law of chastity, which you probably already know what that is. The law of chastity obviously goes a bit further with missionaries. The rule is never be alone telephone with, flirt with, or associate in any other appropriate way with anyone of the opposite sex. Do not telephone, write, email, or accept calls or letters from anyone of the opposite sex living within or near mission boundaries. So the rules are really very strict. They don't want you to get distracted by a crush on your mission. On my mission, they said handshakes only, no hugs. I always think it's funny when I see a missionary picture where there's men and women that are in the picture, and there's always the gap between the men and the women, because even in a picture, you're not supposed to sling your arm around someone of the opposite gender because that would be touching them. Handshakes only. And so it's pretty strict as far as how you're going to be associating with people. There are some funny stories I've heard along with this. In my mission specifically, there was a guy who met an investigator, a female investigator, and he basically, within the process of a few weeks, he left his mission, went home, he unmissionaryified himself, and then he got on a plane back to Colorado, met back up with this girl, and they started dating and eventually got married. She was not a member of the church. So super funny. That seems like it does happen sometimes where, someone will just fall in love with whoever and they end up leaving their mission and trying to get with that person after they're off their mission. On missions, there are also a lot of rumors or almost folklore that ends up spinning around Mormon missions where missionaries will swap stories with each other of situations, that are people being disobedient or just gossip basically. And a common Mormon missionary myth is that there were two zone leaders that's kind of still missionary, but leadership within the mission. And they met these two girls. They really hit it off. And zone leaders usually have keys to the church. And within this myth, the guys, the elders fall in love and they ask the girls if they want to go hot tubbing, and they take them to the church and unlock the baptismal font and use the baptismal font as a hot tub with these girls and make out or whatever, which is so funny because I heard this first on my mission. I then later told it to my sister who also served a mission, and she said she heard on her mission that same story had played out in her mission, which seems somewhat unlikely to me. So that is another funny, especially around the law of chastity. There is a lot of gossip or rumors, that kind of a thing that plays into this specific topic. There's also a term called mission goggles, like goggles, where missionaries fall in love more easily because you're so restricted from romantic relationships. Keep in mind, these are 18-year-old, 19, 20-year-olds. This is like the prime of your life for dating, getting crushes, liking people, falling in love. And so mission goggles refers to how on your mission you can easily end up falling in love with a lot of people or finding them attractive or whatever because you're so starved for true love or the ability to just date people that you just end up falling in love with whoever you meet. Another funny dynamic with romance that sometimes happened is when a girl, is getting baptized, she has to choose someone to baptize her. So if there's a girl that's, maybe a similar age as the missionaries, she will ask the elder that she kind of has a crush on to baptize her, which is another funny dynamic. And they also comment on this dynamic in the Book of Mormon musical, where she chooses which elder is going to baptize her, and they use it kind of as a euphemism for them having sex because, who's going to baptize me for the first time ever in front of everyone. It's a very funny song. Definitely recommend listening and looking up the lyrics. I wanted to include this next portion of the rules purely because I find the addition of this to the handbook interesting. I think you can see a lot of the portions of this handbook are purely meant to keep the church from litigation because they don't want to wade into murky waters if the missionaries are doing something that could land them with some sort of issue with the law. So they do have specific rules about being with children. And I also think, most rules exist in my opinion because something has happened in the past that made it clear they need to make a rule. So it says, because of increasing legal complexities, be extremely careful around children. If charges of inappropriate behavior are made, you may find yourself involved in a lengthy court case. Sounds like they're speaking from experience. If you are found guilty, you could face a substantial jail sentence and church disciplinary action. As in all other relationships, never be alone with a child. Avoid any behavior that could be misunderstood or could appear as inappropriate, including tickling, changing diapers, holding children, and allowing children to sit on your lap. Never babysit children of any age. You know, this also reminds me of all these issues with the Boy Scouts, with the church. There's a lot of coverage about how there's been so much child abuse that has taken place within the Boy Scouts organization, keeping in mind too that the church, the Mormon church, has a huge connection with Boy Scouts. Boy Scouts, the program of Boy Scouts has been used heavily within the church. Most young men end up being part of Boy Scouts. And so I think that's just also reminds me of that there's a lot of child abuse that happens in the Boy Scouts, and it's obviously clear that they've seen that this is an issue, which is why they feel the need to dedicate an entire page of the handbook to explaining that this is how you're supposed to relate with children. Seems fairly common sense, but they obviously felt the need to put it in there. Let's talk about seeking medical care. So as a missionary, healthcare is very strange. You're not even allowed to go on a mission if you have any medical concerns at all. So you do have to get cleared by a doctor to even go on a mission. It says, if you need medical care, call your mission president immediately. Note that it doesn't say call 911. And in the new handbook, the updated handbook, it does actually say call 911 if it's a medical emergency. But when I was serving, it still said, if you need medical care, call your mission president immediately. So this often leads to situations, you know, I'm glad now they at least say call 911, because there were instances on my mission and stories that I would hear from other members once I was back, or, you know, as I was at BYU, of people saying that they had major medical issues, you know, a car accident, getting hit while they were riding their bike, and they would not call 911 because you're very much told, that you should get permission from your mission president before doing anything. Also, my mission president didn't answer his phone half the time. So even if you called him, he just wouldn't answer. So one of my friends, his story was that he was hit while he was riding his bike, and they called the mission president because that's what it says to do. And no answer. So I believe he said they ended up staying there for a couple of hours and finally just decided to call 911. And he ended up needing stitches. And it was a pretty bad bicycle accident. I'm glad they updated it now because it says call 911. But, and I can see why they added that, because I think that there were probably many instances of people deciding not to seek medical attention because it doesn't say you're really allowed to. In my mission, we also had to clear everything medical related through the mission president's wife, who receives some nurse training. So, typically you'd say, hey, I'm so sick. I need to go to urgent care. I have a high fever. I've been coughing all day, whatever. And usually they would say, you need to stay home and just wait it out. So I never really got permission to go if I was ever sick to seek real medical care, because they want to keep expenses down. In addition to the topic of health, it says stay away from unsafe areas, travel after dark only in lighted areas. Pretty hard to do if the suburbs where you are don't have very good street lights, but you're still expected to knock on doors. Vary the routes you travel, walk quickly and with purpose. Do not fill your carrying case with too many items or with materials that appear are heavy or bulky. The scriptures that you're supposed to carry, they're pretty big because it's the Book of Mormon, Bible, New and Old Testament, and the Doctrine and Covenants. That's the definition of a bulky item, which could create the impression that you have items of value. Carry carry a little cash with you so you have something you could give to thieves. Avoid situations that could lead to confrontations. Stay away from public demonstrations and from locations where those seeking to cause trouble might target you. Because of the close association in some people's minds with the church and with the United States of America, in some countries you may need to avoid locations or institutions associated with the United States and avoid areas where large groups of people have anti-American feelings. You're not technically allowed to carry weapons though, so I love that their solution to you maybe having somebody try to attack you is walk quickly and with purpose and give them a little cash so they leave you alone. That's really going to help a lot of people feel so much more secure, I'm sure. In addition to all the rules I've already stated, and we're not done yet, you're also required to follow all the other rules associated with being a member. So that, I feel like that needs to be said as part of this, because there's a whole class of rules we're not going to get into, like the no drinking coffee, so many different rules. So if you want to learn all the rules for just the general membership, which aren't these, but are still very many rules, I suggest checking out my video about how Mormon God has too many rules. Let's talk about housing next. So you're not allowed to have pets. That's a specific rule. No pets allowed on a mission. I had a few plants though that I like to pretend were my little pets. I also had to live with members to save money. I've mentioned that a couple times. Some people have apartments. Some people live with members. It kind of depends on the area where you served. My husband served in Sweden, and he always had, standalone apartments. They also inspect your housing, which I, on my mission, lived in some pretty questionable areas. At one point, I lived with a woman who was a certified hoarder. She had, to get to our room in the basement, we would walk through shelves and shelves of food from the 70s and 80s, lining this little tiny walkway that was in the downstairs living room. The living room was full of food, and there was a little path that was made so that we could still make it to our bedroom. And that is an area that, that housing was inspected by the mission and approved for missionaries to live in. Definitely 100% a hoarder's home, but they still approved it. I find that now to be kind of crazy. And we would even have members come up to us and say, how is it living at this person's house? Is that okay? And of course we'd say, yeah, we love her. We love this person, and just kind of brush it off because we didn't want to be seen as ungrateful. But ultimately we were living in a hoarder's house, and they approved for missionaries to live at this house. There are a lot of rules for communication back home. For me, it was only Mother's Day and Christmas. So I got 2 phone calls in a year. Over the course of my mission, I believe I got to call home 3 times and see my family, face to face. Other than that, it was writing letters. You can write letters only on Mondays. They also say in the handbook that you're not supposed to share anything negative about your area. So if you're going through a hard time, if you are struggling, or if you're living with a hoarder, you're kind of told directly that part of the rules of a mission is you're not supposed to say anything negative about your area. And so I never shared anything negative that was going on with me, with my family, because it's against the rules, basically. You're really supposed to, they say, forget yourself and go to work, and not think about home, not think about your family. But a lot of people take that very far. On my mission, there was a guy whose mom died while he was on his mission, and he chose, not to go back. I think they even said, you can go back if you want. So they threw him that bone, but he said no. He said, this is where my mom would want me to be. And so that's another example of, forgetting yourself and go to work. I mean, that's your mother dying, her funeral, how you're only going to have one of that. But he very purposefully decided to show God he loved him by staying on his mission and having an extra, a week. He would have been gone a week for a week out of 2 years to miss doesn't seem like, seems like you should go to your mom's funeral. But he also said he didn't want the church to have to pay for his plane ticket. So, and that his mom would want him to stay. The interaction with missionaries and how they view their family is very strange. I will say this is a major update since I served. Now missionaries are allowed to call their immediate families once a week, and they can do FaceTime, video call, or just a phone call. So that is improved, and I'm really glad that they changed that, because that, I'm sure, you know, when they're seeing all of these missionaries leaving early, one thing that they probably say, you know, why are all these missionaries leaving early? And the most common response is probably, I miss my family and I want to see them again. I mean, 2 years, that's a really long time to not see your family. A year and a half, it's just an incredibly long amount of time to not get a hug from your mom. So, you know, I think that them updating that is a very good step in the right direction. I hope that if they change more rules, the next rule that they'll get rid of is the never be alone rule, because that's very mentally taxing. The new rule is that you should initiate all text message conversations, online messaging, phone calls, video chats, and if your family needs to contact you, more immediately, they should contact the mission president first. So one of the new rules is that communication should be from the missionary only. You shouldn't be receiving, you know, messages, or if you do, you're supposed to wait until P-Day to respond to any of them. You know, if you have someone who's interested in the church from back home, you are allowed to teach them. So, you know, say someone from your high school reaches out and says, I've been wanting to learn more about the church. You are allowed to talk to them via the internet and do video calls with them. That's really the only communication that's permitted, though, with friends back home outside of letter writing. So like I said, you can call your immediate family, but you are not allowed to talk to your best friend or, you know, anybody who you know from back home other than writing them emails. You're also not allowed to get special visits from family. People say it's too distracting to be able to see your family in person. That they've softened the language a bit in the new handbook and say that maybe you can see them with permission, but they still have language that's very much discouraging seeing your family. The rules around dress and grooming are also very specific, and there's a lot of them. For elders, suits should be of a traditional business style in dark conservative colors. Always wear a white shirt with a tie that is conservative in color, pattern, width, and length. On my mission, some of the more disobedient elders would wear ties that had crazy designs. At least for women, you have a little bit more variation because you can change up your skirt, your shirt, you can do your hair differently. But for men, there's a very much like one way that you're allowed to look. And so for men, really, the tie is the only way to add a little bit of personalization and flavor to your outfit. So I think that's why a lot of men would like collect ties, they would trade ties, because it's very much the only way that you're allowed to be a little tiny bit out there. So the tie was a huge thing for elders. For shoes should be black, dark brown, or Cordovan. They should be made of material that can be polished, keep them clean and polished. Socks should be a solid dark color that matches the slacks. So we're not doing Argyle socks. No crazy special cool socks. They have to be dark, solid color. Do not wear boots unless your mission president authorizes them. For hair, keep your hair relatively short and evenly tampered. Extreme or faddish styles, including spiked, permed, or bleached hair or a shaved head, are not appropriate. Sideburns should reach no lower than the middle of the ear. See the pictures of the missionary haircut included in your call packet. Elders should shave every day. So, I mean, that's a lot of physical restrictions for a man. I'll also include pictures here to show what's approved and what's not. For jewelry, do not wear earrings, necklaces, or any kind of bracelets except for those with a medical purpose. Tattoos, nose rings, or other body piercings or toe rings are not acceptable. Toe rings is so funny because you're wearing shoes all the time. Who even would know that you're wearing a toe ring? So those are the rules for men. Let's jump into women. For sisters, modesty. Maintain a high standard of modesty. Wear clothing that is neither too tight nor too loose. That's a really vague statement, is not transparent or revealing in any way, such as sheer, tight, or stretch fabrics, does not draw attention to any part of the body, is not casual, wrinkled, sloppy, or faddish. Outfits should consist of skirts, skirt and blouse combinations, skirt and jacket combinations, dresses or jumpers. They should be tailored to fit well and be conservative in style and color. Skirts should reach mid-calf or longer if there is a slit, and it should not reach above the knee. T-shirts, sweatpants, golf-style shirts, and other casual t-shirts, pants, or pantsuit are not appropriate. Accessories, jewelry, and other accessories should be simple and should not attract attention. Do not wear more than one piercing in each ear. Tattoos, nose rings, other body piercings, or toe rings. Toe rings, not acceptable. What have they got against toe rings? I don't wear toe rings, to be clear. I just think it's funny they're including it. Hair and makeup. Wash your hair frequently. The style and length of your hair should be easy to manage and should not call attention to itself. Makeup should also not call attention to itself. In video 3 of Manners for Missionaries, they do talk about appearance and social skills. So let's see what they have to say for the women out there.
Have you ever wondered how you appear in the eyes of others? What do they see? How much more receptive might people be to you and your message if you present yourself in the best possible manner? The purpose of this video is to help you improve your effectiveness visually and socially. When my husband was a mission president, we had a sister serving in our mission who seemed to have no concern for her physical appearance. In fact, because of her lack of grooming, no one wanted to be her companion. But when I talked to her about the importance of cleanliness and appearance, I was surprised to hear her say, "I'm here to teach the gospel of Jesus Christ, not to be in a fashion show." Obviously, this sister didn't understand that being our best self is the essence of the gospel.
There's so much slander. The slander. This is just one clip too. There's so many other instances in these Manners for Missionaries where they talk about how the women are slovenly and disgusting and they never shower. Even in the missionary handbook, it says, wash your hair frequently, which is so funny because in the men's section, they never say anything about how often you should be washing your hair, but they definitely let the women know. And the funny thing is that back in the day, they didn't let women missionaries serve until they were 21, which in the church, when you're by the time you're 21, you're basically an old maid. Most women, especially back then, were getting married more around 18, 19, 20. So if you've made it 4 years past your 18th birthday, and then you want to serve a mission, this is basically old maid status for a lot of these people. And a lot of the stories from this era of sister missionaries is that these are like the leftovers in the bottom of the bin serving these missions. And there's so much of an undertone in all these videos, or maybe it's just an overtone of how these women are just gross. And I think it's so funny that she says, I'm not here to be in a fashion show. I'm here to share the gospel. And they're like, oh, honey, you need to do both. Poor girl. Also, how bitchy. This woman is just so bitchy, like saying all of this. Can you imagine if you were that missionary and you saw that? Imagine if you were the girl and you're like, she's sharing my story. She's talking about me on this video that all these missionaries are going to see. It's just so funny and crazy to me. This next clip is from Manners for Missionaries number 4, Visual Poise for Sisters.
As sisters in the gospel, we should maintain a feminine dignity, no matter where we are or what we're doing. Check yourself in the mirror to make sure you're standing straight. Then, as you go throughout the day, remember good posture and stand tall. Most of the time as a missionary, you'll be carrying books, but when your arms are free, stand with them resting on your hip bones or relaxed at your side with the elbows close to the body. If you feel comfortable standing with your arms folded, be sure to let your fingertips show. Otherwise, your arms will pull you into a slump.
Women, don't slump over, you hag. Oh God, it's just so, you can't make this stuff up. It's like those movies feel like they're parody movies, but they're completely being for real. Later in that one, they also teach women how to kneel to pray while still maintaining their modesty. So if you're going to watch any of them, I think that one might be what I thought was the funniest one. Before we get to the last little group of rules, just a reminder to like this video, subscribe to my channel, drop a comment about the most outrageous rule that stood out to you, or if you served a mission, what's the craziest story of rule following from your mission? Did it make you feel like you were in a cult within the cult? Let me know. Next, we have rules for driving, which this one I thought was funny. Just wanted to include it because there's a lot of rules around the driving because, as I said, this is basically protecting the church from litigation and from having to pay out for whatever it might be, and car insurance is expensive. So we had a lot of rules on my mission about the car, how often we had to wash it. We always had to keep receipts from any time we bought gas. We'd have to write the amount of miles on the odometer. It says, do not give rides to anyone other than full-time missionaries. The only exception is for a member who is going to and from a teaching appointment with you and cannot drive his or her own vehicle. So you're not allowed to give investigators rides, which really sucked because we'd have people who wanted to go to church, but we couldn't give them rides and we couldn't find a member who was willing to pick them up, and they couldn't pay, a lot of times they didn't have the money to pay for a ride share or something like that. So that was tricky. Pray for the Lord's protection. Be safety conscious at all times. Drive defensively. Everyone in the car must wear an individual seatbelt whenever the vehicle is moving. If a cellular phone has been approved for your area, only the missionary who is not driving may use it in the car. Both companions share responsibility for safety and vehicle maintenance. One missionary is to stand outside the vehicle and direct the driver whenever he or she is backing. Drive with the headlights on day and night. And then if you get a ticket, you are supposed to pay for the ticket out of your own money. On my mission, I heard some rumors about they had this term called baptizing the car. And I obviously never did this because I was very squeaky clean missionary, but baptizing the car refers to when you go over 100 miles per hour in the mission car, and some of the elders on my mission would brag about baptizing the car, and I was very shocked to find out some of them were doing that. There are also rules around community service. In my mission, we were only allowed to do community service for 10 hours a week. The reason for this rule is that missionaries don't really like knocking on doors, don't really like talking to people in parks. It's a little intimidating. It's a little anxiety producing. And so some missionaries would basically go and try to just work at a soup kitchen instead of having to go knock on doors, which is ultimately probably more helpful to people. But it even says basically that you're not on a mission to do community service. You're on a mission to bring people to Jesus Christ through the doctrine of baptism. And so I always found that so frustrating and annoying that community service is not truly why you're on a mission. And they even say that expressly, that your purpose on your mission is to bring people unto Jesus Christ by helping them be baptized. And so, you're called to serve a mission. You're serving. They use all this wording like you're just God's gift to man and you're going to be doing this great thing for all these people. And then you get there and you realize, oh, but actually true service, working in a soup kitchen, helping at a food bank, whatever, all of these things are pretty discouraged. And if you do it, you should only do it for 10 hours a week because you're supposed to be reminding, you're supposed to be connected to your true purpose as a missionary. So that was to me a very frustrating aspect of serving a mission, because you literally say you're serving a mission and you're not allowed to serve people in a way that feels really good. Thank you so much for watching this video all about all the rules, the outrageous rules that Mormon missionaries are required to follow as part of their service, of their giving their time and paying their way to essentially do 24/7 sales for the church for 2 years to a year and a half. And I just wanted to end on this final clip from Manners for Missionaries that just cracked me up.
When eating in public, the same guidelines apply with only a few exceptions. Blessing the food verbally in public can be awkward for those around you and can be misunderstood.
Oh my God. I just love him staring. Why are you blessing the food? Anyways, thank you for joining me for this video, and I will see you all next week.